going on, everybody? It's your boy HP, and you're listening to the Unsportsmanlike Conduct Podcast, a podcast for the average Joe covering football, my beloved New York Giants, some baseball and basketball from time to time, and any other current events impacting our sports world. Before I get started with today's agenda, everyone please follow me on Instagram. That's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. Again, that's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. I'm also on Twitter now, so everyone please follow me on Twitter. That's _unsportsman. And lastly, but most importantly, if you're listening to this, you might as well subscribe. So everyone please subscribe to my YouTube page. Today's agenda, we are weeks away from the NFL season, so I figured what better time than now to give a week-by-week, game-by-game win-loss prediction for the 2019 New York Giants regular season. Let's get this episode started. So pretty much ever since I started this podcast, I would even say maybe over the last several episodes, there's been a common theme. I've given an outlook on the New York Giants defense with all those new young secondary. We drafted DeAndre Baker, Julian Love. We had Sam Beal from last year, Grant Haley from last year. Obviously, we picked up Jabril Peppers in that OBJ trade. For those of you who have listened to this podcast, you all know that I'm very high on this linebacking group with Lorenzo Carter, B.J. Goodson, Alec Ogletree. We have a couple of depth positions at that outside linebacker with Kareem Martin and Marcus Golden. With the addition of Dexter Lawrence, we do fill in that void of Snacks Harrison. While we're still missing a pass rusher, I do like some of the other pieces like B.J. Hill and Dalvin Tomlinson. So I think we have a pretty decent young core of players for this New York Giants defense that are going to lead us to be a competitive defense this year. And also, if you've kept up with this podcast, you know that I have some high expectations for this offense as well. This is the first time in a long time, as I've stated many, many times, that Eli Manning has gotten a solidified offensive line, probably since the last time we've won the Super Bowl. I think we have depth at wide receiver that while we may not have that big play, deep threat wide receiver because we lost OBJ, we do have good enough competent wide receivers such as Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, who can run those short to intermediate routes and get you yards after the catch. And I think Evan Ingram's going to have a big leap this year because he's shown statistically that when OBJ is not playing, that's when he's at his best. So I think overall we have a pretty good set of pieces on the offense and the defense to make us a competitive team. Again, and you know, I've done this a couple of over the last couple of episodes where I think we'll be a very competitive team that will win between 7 to 9 games. I think our defense is going to keep us competitive enough in close games where, you know what, maybe those 7 to 9 wins switch the scale to between 8 to 10 wins. Maybe 9 through 11 wins. So, you know, we'll see. It's all about a wait and see show. And so I was kind of looking over the schedule this week and sort of kind of dissecting where I think our wins are going to come, where I think our losses are going to come, where I think we may hit some losing streaks, some winning streaks. So let's get this started. So week 1, so the official season opener, September 8th, Sunday at 4:25 p.m. So that is a primetime game. And, you know, to no one's surprise, the New York Giants are opening up the season facing the Dallas Cowboys. This is an away game. I think the Dallas Cowboys are one of the best teams in the NFC and by far the best team in the NFC East. I think they have a complete defense. They have a pretty good front seven with that tremendous linebacking group. They have some pretty young studs in the secondary. I think their offense speaks for itself with Ezekiel Elliott. While I'm not high on Dak Prescott does play fairly decent against the New York Giants. They do have Amari Cooper. So I think this is the most complete team in the NFC East. And I think the Giants, coming out of the gate week 1, will struggle against the Dallas Cowboys. Because, look, Dak Prescott's a careful quarterback. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And I think that, our young secondary is going to have some trouble getting some stops. I think from a run defense standpoint, I think that's going to be a challenge because while we may end up having some success on some drives against Ezekiel Elliott, they're going to keep pounding the ball because Ezekiel Elliott's probably going to have 20 to 25 carries, and that is going to wear out our defense. Hopefully, and this is going to be new. I mean, our defensive line is a young defensive line. Our linebacking group's a young linebacking group, so we may have some struggles throughout this game. I think we're going to give up a lot of first downs. I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to find third and short situations, several third and short situations. And I think from an offensive standpoint, again, this is the first game without Odell Beckham Jr., but this is the first time that we're going to have a pretty good offensive line that Eli Manning will probably have more time this time over the last several years to sort of look for his receivers, let the receivers get open, and this is all depending on how Pat Shurmur calls this game plan. But I think our offense will be pretty okay. Granted, I know that the Dallas Cowboys have one of the more better defenses in the league. I think our offense will be okay. Now, if our offense struggles early in this game, as we've seen over the last couple of years, where there's so many 3-and-outs, where we don't even get a first down on some of these drives, I have this game as an uphill battle the whole way. We'll be down the whole game. If the New York Giants offense is progressing, is getting yards, is getting first downs, and while we may not always be getting the touchdowns and getting field goals, I don't think it'll necessarily be a struggle uphill battle. I think it will be sort of even with the Dallas Cowboys, where we'll maybe be tied, or maybe the Dallas Cowboys will be up maybe just one score rather than 2 scores or 3 scores. Instead of being up 17-zip, the Dallas Cowboys may be up 10-7 by halftime or something. I think if the offense is competitive out the gate, if the defense can get stops out the gate, I think that's where I see this first game sort of heading, where it's going to be sort of a nail-biter, as it almost usually is against the Dallas Cowboys. And then with that said, I do have us unfortunately losing the season opener to the Dallas Cowboys. That'll leave us at 0-1 after week 1. I think, again, this is going to be a very close game. I have us, this is probably going to be in the low to mid-20s. I don't see any team scoring more than 24, 25 points. I think both teams will hit the 20-point mark. It might be your traditional 24-21 to the Dallas Cowboys, with the Dallas Cowboys winning with getting a field goal towards the end of the game. And then with week 2, September 15th on Sunday, we're playing the Buffalo Bills, an AFC East Division team, at 1:00. So this is an early Sunday game. The Buffalo Bills are going to be really, really competitive. And I think this is where we're going to hit our sort of our first losing streak, because I think the Buffalo Bills defense is going to be very competitive, and I think they're going to give Eli Manning a lot of problems. And I think, similarly to the Dallas Cowboys, they have some pretty good linebackers, a pretty good set of DBs back there from a secondary standpoint. However, I think if we do end up winning this matchup, it's because I don't trust Josh Allen yet to be able to sort of dissect this defense. But historically, the Giants have always struggled against quarterbacks who can scramble. And I think that's going to be a big problem too. I think we're going to have some trouble sort of containing Josh Allen, because I think Josh Allen, whether he beats us with his feet by getting rushing yards, if he doesn't do that, he'll definitely be able to scramble in and out of the pocket, getting away from the pressure, especially because we don't have a pass rusher in our front seven to get to Josh Allen. So when we end up bringing in DBs to get to Josh Allen, Josh Allen can break those tackles. Josh Allen can break and sort of juke out of the way of a cornerback or a safety. So I think with that said, that's going to give, he'll be able to scramble out of those pressure plays and find receivers open, keeping that respected play going longer. I think our defense struggles a little bit in this game, but I don't think we give up that many points. But I do think that we'll have some sort of gut-wrenching. We'll end up giving up a lot of gut-wrenching first downs, where we have them at the 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6. I don't think we'll find the Buffalo Bills in 3rd and short situations. I think we'll find the Buffalo Bills in 3rd and intermediate to long situations, maybe 3rd and 5, the 3rd and 6, 7s. But I think they'll find a way to convert a lot of those, just because, again, we have a young secondary, and I think it's too early in the season for the young secondary to really come together. And I think the leader of that secondary from just, it's going to be Janoris Jenkins. But I think from someone who's actually going to be able to see the whole field, it's going to be Jabril Peppers. So I think that's just a little too early in the season for the secondary to really hone in and sort of build a solid foundation to be able to stop opposing offenses. And so with that, from an offensive standpoint, I think they may be able to stuff Saquon Barkley at the line. I'm really high on the linebackers that they have on the Buffalo Bills. Again, they have some physical DBs. I think Tre'Davious White's going to cause a lot of trouble for Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard's a great receiver, but Sterling Shepard was also a byproduct of Odell Beckham being a threat and opposing defenses focusing on Odell Beckham over the last couple of years. So this is going to be probably one of the first true challenges for Sterling Shepard this year, where he's going to be facing one of the top cornerbacks in the league in Tre'Davious White. So I think he may be able to take Sterling Shepard out of the game, and then Eli Manning's going to have to sort of focus his targets on Evan Ingram and Golden Tate. So I think by taking away one of our most lethal passing offensive weapons, that's sort of going to cripple our Eli Manning's options. And I think just with that said, with not being able to move the ball down the field from an air attack standpoint, and them stuffing the run, I think we will end up losing this game as well. So I have us going 0-2 after week 2, and at this point we've lost to Dallas in week 1, and then again we lose to the Buffalo Bills in week 2. And I understand a lot of folks are probably thinking, well, this is a home game. The New York Giants are going to be home. But I don't trust Eli Manning and this offense so early in the season to be able to move the ball down effectively against this stacked Buffalo Bills defense. I think this may even be one of those games where Eli Manning has that typical sort of meltdown game where he throws one too many interceptions or one too many close interceptions that prevent the New York Giants from moving the ball down the field and even getting into field goal position. So week 3, September 22nd, is also a Sunday. This is an away game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is where I think the New York Giants finally turned around after losing the first 2 games and get their first victory of the 2019 regular season. Look, I think that at this point, there's going to be probably a lot of pressure from the media. I think the New York Giants are going to have their backs against the wall, and I think what better way to have your back against the wall heading into a game that's probably the most winnable game starting in the season, which is against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm not too crazy about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. They have a pretty good defensive line with Jason Pierre-Paul. They did just recently sign Ndamukong Suh several weeks ago. They do have Vita Vea. I like that defensive front. However, with their linebackers, I'm not too crazy about. They did that, their linebackers were a weakness, which is why they drafted Devin White. And then from a secondary standpoint, I don't see anyone that I'm too worried about that I think could stop Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, and Evan Ingram. I think our receivers are going to have a field day against that secondary. And, to be honest, Jason Pierre-Paul is a defensive end that falls off the screen. He is 1 more year older. Also, Ndamukong Suh is 1 more year older. There's a reason why Ndamukong Suh didn't have that crazy of a market when the Los Angeles Rams didn't re-sign him. There's a reason why the Los Angeles Rams didn't re-sign him, right? If he was that good still, then he would have been on a team way quicker. He was one of the last players or the last sort of notable players to actually sign with the team. So I don't think Ndamukong Suh is going to be that much of a threat. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to have obviously a productive season, but I don't think he's the Ndamukong Suh that we're used to seeing. I think Saquon Barkley is going to have a good game. This is probably going to be his first game where he may even break 100 yards. I don't think Saquon Barkley breaks 100 rushing yards against the Dallas Cowboys in week 1 or in week 2 against the Buffalo Bills, but I think in week 3 we finally see Saquon Barkley break that 100-yard rushing mark. So I think from an offensive standpoint, complete offensive standpoint, both in the air attack and in the running game, this is where we're probably going to be the most effective against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. From a defensive standpoint, I'm not too worried about this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. I really do not like Jameis Winston. I think he's a very inaccurate quarterback, and he's not very mobile either. So, I think we'll be able to sort of close in that pocket because I'm not too crazy about this offensive line either. I think from a receiver standpoint, they do have a couple of pieces. Obviously, they have Mike Evans, who's one of the best wide receivers in the game. They do have O.J. Howard, who's an emerging tight end who was drafted in the same class, actually, as Evan Ingram. Other than that, I'm not too concerned about the other wide receiver options on the Buccaneers offense. And I'm also not worried about their running backs either. Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones, they're decent running backs, but they're not that great. So I'm not worried of those 2 running backs gashing up our front 7. And I think by week 3, our front 7 might end up showing that they can sort of put it together. And don't be surprised if this is the first game where the secondary has its coming out party, where DeAndre Baker gets his first interception, where Jabril Peppers has a great game for the New York Giants, where Julian Love ends up seeing more playing time over others. I think this is the game where the whole team sort of comes out both from an offensive and defensive perspective. And so I have us winning that game, and then by the end of week 3, we'll be 1-2. And then week 4 sort of starts our first winning streak of the season. On week 4, we face the Redskins. That's a home game, September 29th at 1 p.m. Look, the Redskins have a really good front seven. I think they have one of the best front sevens in the NFC East division, probably in the NFC East conference as a whole. They have some great studs at the defensive line, and they have some great studs at the linebacker position. However, where I think the New York Giants are going to have a lot of success in this game is in the passing game. I don't think they have enough DBs to defend our receivers. We have Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, and Golden Tate, and then I think this is the game where, Saquon Barkley may also see a lot of success in the passing game. I think from a run game standpoint, Saquon Barkley may not be able to break 100 rushing yards. I think he'll get somewhere between 70 and 80, but I think he'll be equally effective and get maybe that many yards from a passing standpoint as well. I think the Redskins are going to have some trouble stopping the passing game. I think we're going to convert many third downs. And then, just from a defensive standpoint, I'm not too worried about the Redskins' offensive players. I'm not worried about Case Keenum. I think there's still a question mark in the air on who's going to be their starting running back in week 1 for the Washington Redskins. And then I'm also just not concerned about their receivers. And again, coming off of a victory against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where I believe is going to be the first game where this team has its coming out party, where the young studs like DeAndre Baker, Jabril Peppers, Julian Love, and then even veteran Janoris Jenkins have a great game from a secondary standpoint. I think that's going to carry a lot of momentum heading into this game, especially because it's going to be a division game, so the tensions are going to be high at this point. I think that momentum is going to carry along, and we're going to see another successful game against the Redskins from our secondary. I think we're going to win both sides of the ball. I think this Redskins team won't be able to score a lot of points. I think we'll find the Redskins in a lot of third and intermediate to long situations. And in the opposite end, I think the Giants will find themselves in third and short situations. In situations where, we may be able to hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley on these third downs, because we'll find ourselves in, third and threes, third and fours, and even third and fives. I think, for the most part, we won't find ourselves in these third and sevens, third and eights, and third and 10 situations. Because even if we're not successful running the ball on that first play in the drive, I think we can sort of have a quick slant route to Sterling Shepard or Golden Tate or Evan Ingram to get us, 4 or 5 yards, which is equally as good as a rushing play. Because that's the objective of sort of building up to the third down, right? You want to sort of build up the progression of that drive so that when you find yourself on third downs, they aren't third and long situations, and they're situations that can be easily converted into first downs. So week 4 is where I find ourselves winning against the Washington Redskins. We'll end up having a 2-game winning streak, and that'll also be our first division win of the season because, again, if you don't remember, I have us losing week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. Week 5 is where I think we'll sort of fall off. Week 5, we're home again against the Minnesota Vikings, October 6th at 1 p.m. I think this, historically, we've just done very poor against that division. We've always done poor against the Vikings, the Green Bay Packers, and the Detroit Lions. And just simply from a historical standpoint, I don't see us winning against the Minnesota Vikings. Eli Manning also has historically played very poorly against the Minnesota Vikings. And granted, while I do think that our secondary is going to be on a roll, carrying a lot of momentum from a 2-game winning streak, this Minnesota Vikings, offense are going to have receivers that are going to be hard and put a lot of pressure on our young secondary to actually stop them from making plays. I think this is going to be our first real test for the secondary because they're going to have to face guys like, obviously, Kyle Rudolph. We know about that, but then Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. And those two guys are probably just better than any other wide receiver duo out there from a running route standpoint. They're both very good at running sophisticated routes, and I think that's going to trick our DBs. I think our DBs, this may be a game where we find ourselves having, those silly pass interference calls. Because our DBs are going to get beat early in the route progression. They're going to be forced to sort of tug and grab on the jerseys of Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs just so they don't give up even bigger plays. I think from a running game standpoint, I think Dalvin Cook, obviously if he's healthy, I think he's going to have a pretty decent game as well. I think our front line is our biggest weakness on this defense. I'm not too crazy about this defensive line. And I think Dalvin Cook's probably going to have some pretty decent success against us. So, obviously more on that. We'll see how that ends up playing. But then most importantly, Kirk Cousins always rips into our defense. I just feel like, we never really have great games against Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins always just knows how to tear us apart. I think this is going to be an uphill battle game. I think defensively, the Vikings are pretty good. I mean, they are stacked and have talent at each defensive position, which is pretty impressive. I mean, starting with the defensive line, Daniel Hunter, Linval Joseph, Everson Griffin on the other end of the defensive line. And then with the linebackers, you have Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks. And then their secondary is pretty good too. Trey Waynes, obviously everyone knows Xavier Woods and Harrison Smith. Even Mackenzie Alexander is a pretty good cornerback from a depth position. I mean, this team's going to cause Eli Manning a lot of problems this year, and I think we will end up losing that game. I think this game's going to be a very sort of humbling loss because we will be on a 2-game winning streak, and I think this game's going to bring us back to reality, bring us back to earth, and sort of have us reevaluate sort of the way our offense is working, some of the play calls that Pat Shurmur's calling, and, I think this is definitely going to be a wake-up call because I think the Vikings are going to spank us this game. So I do have us losing in Week 5, and this will have us at 2-3. At Week 6, this is a Thursday night game, October 10th, primetime television. I hope to have me and my buddy, so my buddy's a pretty big New England Patriots fan, so I'm hoping him and I can go down to New England and actually watch that game. This is a game that I think the New York Giants win. I just think I have to be subjective here. I'm not going to pick the Patriots over my New York Giants for the simple fact that I hate the New England Patriots. I think I hate the New England Patriots more than I hate any NFC East division team. But you know what? I think that after getting spanked by the Minnesota Vikings, I think we're going to be very, very motivated to do well against the New England Patriots, just given the history, right? I mean, we've won the two Super Bowls against the New England Patriots. We have also won the last regular season game. We actually have had close regular season games with the New England Patriots. Some nail biters. We did lose the last one a couple of years ago, which I was at, actually. And I think the year before that, the New York Giants won. So we've been sort of trading jabs, given the 2 Super Bowl victories. I think this is going to be a very, very important game. And I think the Giants are going to be ready for it. I think, I can't even really give a breakdown of the analysis here. I think, the New England Patriots are going to be a great team. I think, from a passing standpoint and running game standpoint, they're going to be pretty successful against us. But I think our defense is going to hold up. I think this is the first game where we're going to see that sort of bend, don't break defense, and the New England Patriots end up scoring more field goals than touchdowns. But ultimately, I do have the New York Giants winning this game. It is going to be a close game. I think it'll be in the mid-20s by both teams. I don't think there's going to be too much yardage, but I think the story here is actually going to be time of possession. The team that wins this game will win because they won time of possession. But again, I do have the New York Giants winning against the New England Patriots at Week 6. And at this point, the New York Giants are 3-3, hovering at 500. Then at Week 7, October 20th against the Arizona Cardinals, we are home at this game. It's a 1 p.m. game. And this is actually a game that I think starts a new winning streak. I do think we'll beat the Arizona Cardinals. I'm just not too worried about the Arizona Cardinals offense. I know they drafted Kyle Murray. I know a lot of people are high on Kyle Murray. And then they also added some young depth wide receivers, right? They added Hakeem Butler and Andy Isabella, who are probably primed to take over snaps from Larry Fitzgerald. Christian Kirk isn't that bad of a receiver, but I'm not too worried about Christian Kirk, to be honest. I don't think he's that much of a wide receiver threat. I think, they obviously have David Johnson, but I think that we'll be able to contain David Johnson because their offensive line isn't that good. I think we have athletic enough linebackers. I think this might be even the coming out party for our front seven. I think this is one of the better games that our front seven will have. We'll probably have a season high in sacks from a team standpoint. And then once again, I just think that, while there is depth at wide receiver, there's a lot of unproven depth at wide receiver, which will take a lot of pressure off of our young DBs. I think DeAndre Baker, once again, has a great game. I think Janoris Jenkins and Jabril Peppers will have a good game. I think from a defensive standpoint, I think the Giants are just going to have a good game overall. And I think James Bettcher, wants to prove to the Arizona Cardinals that, it was their loss by not retaining James Bettcher. I think James Bettcher is going to have a heck of a day play calling for this game. And, I understand that Kyle Murray can scramble a bit and get in and out of the pocket and extend plays, but I think we'll be able to contain that because I think our linebackers and our front four are up to the task. Defensively, though, this Cardinals defense, it's a pretty good defense. They have some pretty solid pieces. They obviously have Chandler Jones. They did sign Terrell Suggs this past offseason, rather. Terrell Suggs is aging, obviously, but, Terrell Suggs isn't a bad player. He can still play, and I think he's still going to provide some pressure to Eli Manning during the game. They do have Patrick Peterson, and they did draft Byron Murphy, who I also wanted the Giants to draft, but they were unable to do so. They also drafted Deontay Thompson, who was a free safety who I also wanted the Giants to draft, but they ended up actually drafting Julian Love with that pick instead of Deontay Thompson. They have middle linebacker Jordan Hicks, Hassan Reddick, Brooks Reed. They have some pretty decent linebackers as well, so I think they'll give Eli Manning a little bit of trouble, but the secondary is pretty good as well. Look, DJ Swearinger is starting for them. Budda Baker's pretty good, and then Robert Alford as a sort of the depth at cornerback in that secondary. This defense is pretty stacked. I'm kind of looking at this depth chart and thinking that I think Eli Manning will have some trouble throwing against this team, but I think ultimately the New York Giants offense is more seasoned enough with enough talent and players and more complete enough to overcome the hurdles that they'll face against the Arizona Cardinals defense versus the Arizona Cardinals offense having enough talent and seasoned players to overcome the hurdles that they'll face being such a young group against this New York Giants defense. So with that said, again, I do have the New York Giants winning this game, being 4-3, and they'll be officially in a 2-game winning streak. And then in Week 8, they'll be traveling. They'll be having an away game against Detroit Lions. This is a 1 p.m. game on October 27th. Look, again, as I previously stated, we struggle against this division. I have us losing, against the Minnesota Vikings a couple of weeks earlier to this game, and I'm going to have us losing against Detroit, especially because we're going to be on the road. Matt Stafford is going to tear this defense apart. He's going to feast off of this very young secondary, and again, I don't know how well we're going to be able to get pressure on the quarterback. So when Matt Stafford has time to throw, with this group of wide receivers, he is going to tear us apart. I think the passing yardage on this game is going to be horrendous. And again, it's going to be just another game where the secondary and this defense in total actually will get humbled once again. Look, we all know they have Marvin Jones. They also have Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay has shown flashes last year of being a true number one wide receiver, which was why the Lions were so comfortable with trading away Golden Tate. And then they spent a first-round pick on T.J. Hawkinson. Folks, when a team spends a first-round pick, and this was an early-round pick, when you spend an early first-round pick on a tight end, that means you are so confident in that tight end's ability, you're okay with foregoing drafting any other position, especially because this draft was so deep, especially in that first round with defensive studs. And the Lions needed help on the defense as well. But they were so high on T.J. Hawkinson, they decided to spend that first-round pick on T.J. Hawkinson. Which I think I think T.J. Hawkinson is going to exploit our linebackers because I don't think we have linebackers that are that great in coverage. I'm not sure who's going to line up against T.J. Hawkinson, so that's also going to be something to look out for during that game. That's going to be a matchup that's definitely going to burn us. From a running back standpoint, I'm not too concerned. I'm not too worried about Kerryon Johnson and Theo Riddick. I think we'll be able to contain them. I think our front seven is up to the task to contain them. I'm not too crazy about the Lions' offensive line, although they do have an improved offensive line versus, as opposed to some of the offensive lines that the Lions have had over the last couple of years. But yeah, I think, from a defensive standpoint, this offense will burn us. I think we're going to give a lot of yardage within the pass game. And I think Matt Stafford's completion percentage is going to be pretty high too. It's definitely expected to be between 65 and 70% completion rate. From a defensive standpoint, I'm not too concerned. I think that the New York Giants will have a pretty good offensive output. I think we're going to run the ball pretty well. I think we're going to pass the ball pretty well. I think a matchup to note will be Darius Slayton, cornerback from the Detroit Lions, against Sterling Shepard. I think if Darius Slayton takes Sterling Shepard out of the game, Eli Manning is going to be forced to reshift his focus to Evan Ingram and Golden Tate. However, we do have Saquon Barkley, who is a top 5 running back. So I think from an offensive standpoint, we're going to be competitive. I think we're going to be able to move the ball up and down the field, because I think overall the Detroit Lions don't have the greatest secondary, and they don't have a great front seven either. So I think our offensive line will be able to get some push and also be able to stand back and protect Eli Manning and give Eli Manning enough time to throw the ball and find other receivers open in the event that Sterling Shepard does get taken out of the game by Darius Slayton. And I think that's going to be sort of the important thing to watch. Because if the New York Giants can keep up from an offensive output perspective with the Matt Stafford and the Detroit Lions, then this is a coin toss, and the New York Giants could potentially win this game. However, given that Matt Stafford has had historical success against us, and given the fact that our secondary is still going to be a young secondary, I don't trust our defense to make enough stops late in this game to bring us to the promised land and get us that victory. And therefore, I have us losing this Week 8 matchup against the Detroit Lions, bringing us 4-4 after the first half of the season, which is a significant improvement from last season, because after the first 8 games of the 2018 season, we were 1-7. We were like technically out of the playoff race. I mean, we had to have so many circumstances working for us. So many other teams had to lose. Other teams had to win. We would have to win out in order for the New York Giants to make it to the playoffs last year. But at 4-4 after the first 8 games, I mean, you're at 500. That 500 is evident of a competitive team. And who knows how other teams are going to be? Maybe 4-4 makes us number 2 in the NFC East division rather than number 3. And now that I'm thinking about it, 4-4 probably will make us a competitive 3rd seed in our NFC East division. And you know how all this goes. The Eagles end up hovering a little over 500. Maybe the Dallas Cowboys are the ones that end up sort of running away with the division. But at 4-4, there's still a good chance that we can fight late into the season for a playoff spot. So we're still in the season. We're still engaged. All the fans are going to be watching the games. There's going to be still good attendance at MetLife Stadium. There's still going to be competitive football product out there. And then in Week 9, we head back home and face the Dallas Cowboys. This is a Monday night game on November 4th. Big game for various reasons. The Giants, based off my projections, have already lost the season opener to the Dallas Cowboys, making them 0-1 against a division rival. In order to make it to the playoffs and to beat out other teams in the playoffs, you have to have a good division record. Especially because we know that if the Dallas Cowboys take the number one seed in the NFC East, then the Eagles are probably going to be fighting for the number 2 spot, probably fighting for the wild card spot. And at that point, it's probably going to be a toss-up between the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. And what's going to come down to it is who has the better record division. Do the Eagles have a better record division, or do the New York Giants do? And if the New York Giants don't, then the New York Giants can't get into the playoffs. The New York Giants cannot afford to go 0-2 here. Also, the New York Giants will be 4-4 at this point. The Cowboys will be probably 6-2 or 7-1. One of the better teams in the NFC conference. So there's going to be two different stories at this point, 2 different moods. The Giants are going to have a high sense of urgency facing a Dallas Cowboys team that they lost in the season opener. And they're also going to know that they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot for the rest of the season, whereas the Dallas Cowboys are going to be sitting comfortably on top of the NFC East, not having as much of a sense of urgency as the New York Giants. And for those very reasons, I think the New York Giants show up to play and give the Cowboys a run for their money and end up taking this W. And I think that this is going to start a winning streak, because you know what? We're going to end up going and facing the Jets in Week 10. And I'm very surprised that the Week 10 matchup against the New York Jets, this inner-city matchup, isn't a primetime game. At least make it a 4:30 game in the evening. Instead, it's a 1 p.m. game, but you know what? I'll take it anyway. But I have the New York Giants being the New York Jets because I don't believe the New York Jets have a good enough offense against our defense. I think this offensive line is still very weak. I think we'll be able to get to Sam Darnold frequently. We'll either sack him or have him throw some pretty poor decisions. I think, expect our secondary to get some interceptions on this game, and expect us to actually contain Le'Veon Bell, because I don't think this offensive line is going to be good enough against our pretty good group of linebackers and our interior linemen to sort of make Le'Veon Bell have a good game against us. And given that we'll be able to stop the run game, that's going to put a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold to move the ball down the field through the air. And you know what? The Jets just frankly don't have enough good wide receiver options Robbie Anderson is their best wide receiver. Robbie Anderson is a burner. A burner should not be your best wide receiver. Your best wide receiver should be an excellent route runner who can break in between routes better than anyone. That's why we loved OBJ. That's why Golden Tate was a great wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. And amongst all the other great wide receivers like Julio Jones and Antonio Brown, Mike Evans and Keenan Allen, right? So I don't think the Jets have that. I think they're going to be very easy to defend. And I think this game is going to be ours. But you know what? The Giants are historically known for being in close games every single game. So I think this will be a close game. But I think the Giants will be up for most of this game. I don't think the lead changes too often against the New York Jets. And by winning Week 10, we'll be winning 2 games in a row, keeping us at 6-4 right before the bye week. This puts us in really, really good position because at 6-4, we're now above 500. We're on a 2-game winning streak, and that's the best thing about heading into a bye week. You want to head into a bye week, streaking. You don't want to head into a bye week figuring out what's wrong with the team. Why is the team losing so much? Because at that point, you don't want the coaches to sort of hit the reset button after the bye week. Heading into the bye week, you want to have a couple of wins under your belt. You want to have the team feeling good because the team usually goes on vacation. Players like to get more time off. You want them refreshed, coming back and trying to continue this winning streak. Because then at week 12, we're away facing the Chicago Bears November 24th. This is also a 1 p.m. game. I think we're going to be pretty good against the Chicago Bears. This is an offense that I'm really not too concerned about. I'm not afraid of Mitch Trubisky. I'm not really afraid of any of their wide receiver options. I think Allen Robinson is going to be very containable. I think they are going to have a pretty decent running game. But I don't think they have a legitimate running back that can run that well. Tariq Cohen is he's a dual threat back, but not so much of a threat from a running game, but more of a pass game. I think that's going to be pretty easy to defend because, it's going to be one of those situations where we see Tariq Cohen in the game and the Giants defense will know that Tariq Cohen's most likely in this game because this is a pass play. Tariq Cohen is not going to get, between 15 to 20 carries. He'll most likely get between 10 to 15 carries. And Tariq Cohen's a running back that you have to split carries with because he's just not a bruiser. He's not someone that can carry the load like that. So I think from a running game and an offensive passing game, I think the Giants, the Giants are going to be able to be pretty successful defending that. I think from a defensive standpoint, that's where Eli Manning will probably struggle. That defensive stack, not only from a front seven standpoint, but also in the secondary. Expect Eli Manning to throw some interceptions. But I think overall, and something very similar to the to the Arizona Cardinals, where I think our offense is more up to the task of doing well against the Chicago Bears defense than the Chicago Bears offense is up to the task facing the New York Giants defense. And don't get me wrong, I'm not comparing the New York Giants defense to the Bears defense. I don't even think it's going to be a top 5 defense. But I think at this point, we will be hovering between the rankings of 10 and 15 as a total defense. I don't think the Chicago Bears will maybe score enough points against us. I think that will also force on Mitch Trubisky to throw some interceptions because when we do contain that running game, Mitch Trubisky's going to have no choice but to throw the ball more frequently and more often. This is another game where I think we'll also find the Chicago Bears in third to intermediate and third to long situations. So at week 12, I have the Giants winning again, extending that winning streak from 2 to 3, making the New York Giants a 7-4 team. So at 7-4, we're sitting pretty well and we're looking pretty competitive, and a playoff spot is in sight. But then in week 13, we face the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers. Green Bay had a tremendous offseason. I thought they had some pretty good pickups in free agency. I thought they had a decent draft as well. I think this defense got much more better, and just historically, we've always sucked against the Green Bay Packers, and Aaron Rodgers has notoriously ripped our defense apart. I think this is a game that we lose. I think the Green Bay Packers will score a lot of points on us because not only do they have a great air attack, but they also have a hell of a running game. I think Aaron Jones is going to run up and down all over against our defense. I think we're going to have a very hard time sort of stopping and forcing 3 and outs. I think the Green Bay Packers are going to win with time of possession. And I think I think that's going to put a lot of pressure on our offense, forcing us to call plays that maybe we're not used to calling, and then also maybe forcing Eli to throw interceptions that he wasn't, he probably wouldn't have thrown if the pressure wasn't too high to move the ball down the field and actually win that game against the Packers. So I do have our winning streak stopping against the Green Bay Packers, leaving us to 7-5 after week 13. And then in week 14, we head to Philadelphia for a Monday night football matchup at 8:15 p.m. That's on December 9th. Look, the Giants don't play well against the Philadelphia Eagles, and they especially don't play well against them when they're at Philly. I don't see how the Giants are going to win. We consistently and historically have gotten chewed up and torched by Carson Wentz. Even when it looks like the Giants are on a good run, even when they're up early in games, Carson Wentz ends up finding a way to bring that team back against us. And same thing, similarly from the defensive standpoint, their defense ends up holding up and preventing us from getting those first downs, prevent us from getting the ball down to at least field goal range, and it sort of gets our offense really cold quickly. I think we've had some pretty good starts against the Eagles, but we haven't been able to finish well against them. And, again, we've historically played poorly on the road when we do play Philly. I just don't see Big Blue coming out with the win on this. So I have us at a 2-game losing streak after that Philly matchup at Week 14, leaving us at 7-6. And then we face Miami Week 15, December 15th at 1 p.m. This is where the Miami Dolphins will be playing at MetLife Stadium. I do have the Giants beating the Miami Dolphins. I don't think the Dolphins are that great of a team, to be quite frank with you. From an offensive standpoint, I don't see too many threats. And I think from a New York Giants defensive standpoint, I think we're going to have a pretty good game. I think we'll be able to contain Kenyon Drake and Kalen Ballage. And I also think that, from an air attack standpoint, I don't think Kenny Stills and Devontae Parker are that much of a threat. I think we have enough I think our DBs are better in totality than the Miami Dolphins wide receiver groups are. So I'm not too worried from a defensive standpoint. And then from an offensive standpoint, I think that, Eli Manning and company are going to have a pretty decent game. I don't think the Miami Dolphins have the most greatest defense. I think there's still some pieces missing in that secondary and in that front line. I think we'll be able to, run the ball well. And also that will set up some plays for some deep pass plays as well. So I do have the Giants back in the W column after a 2-game skid, which will leave us at 8-6 heading into Week 16, December 22nd, when we face the Washington Redskins in Washington. That's a 1 p.m. game. And, I think a lot of people are going to think I'm crazy, but, I have the Giants sweeping the Washington Redskins this year. I almost had the Giants sweeping the Washington Redskins almost every year, and they end up not doing so. But I just don't think this Washington Redskins team, from an offensive standpoint, is that good. There's no one that I'm worried about on that Redskins team where I think we'll end up taking over games and sort of depleting our defense, cutting through our defense. I think this is just going to be another instance where we'll find the Redskins in 3rd and long situations. And then also from an offensive standpoint, I think while, it may be a challenge because that Redskins defense is so stacked, I think our offense is more capable of scoring points on that Redskins defense than that Redskins offense is capable of scoring points against our New York Giants defense. And then with that W, we'll end up having a 2-game winning streak, and then we'll end up finishing Week 16 at 9-6. And then lastly, Week 17, we're playing Philadelphia December 29th, which is the day after my brother's birthday, by the way. It's a 1 p.m. game. And again, I just don't know how well we're going to play against Philly. This is a tough one because I think at this point the Giants are going to be 9-6. Philadelphia is probably going to be around 9-6 as well. You can probably assume they'll be around 9-6. They may even be 10-5 at this point. Dallas may be, running away with the division. They may be around, the 13-2 or 13-3 sort of record range. So this is probably going to be a very big game for us, and I believe that this Week 17 matchup will decide who gets that wild card spot in the NFC. Again, I've said this before. I think the Dallas Cowboys will run away with the NFC East, but I think that second spot now may be up in the air and possibly a coin toss between the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is the game that will decide it. But unfortunately, I have the New York Giants losing to the Philadelphia Eagles because, again, I do not trust them when it comes to playing against Carson Wentz and that Philadelphia Eagles defense. And because of that, the New York Giants will unfortunately go 9-7 and end up missing the playoffs in the 2019 regular season. I know that's not something that everyone wants to hear, but think about it. 9-7 is way better than 5-11. And I'll even give you this. Let's say, my prediction isn't correct. I'll even be happy with 7-9. I'll even be happy with 8-8 because that's a significant improvement from 5-11. I just want to see some improvements. I want to see more competitive games. And the way I've sort of outlined this a week-by-week, game-by-game prediction, it'll keep fans engaged through the very last week of the season, whereas the last several years, our football season ended so early because the Giants were always mathematically out of it by the bye week. With the exception of when McAdoo was a first-year head coach and we made it to the playoffs as a 10-6 team, we've always been mathematically out of it by the bye week. And I think this is the first time, if my prediction is correct, that New York Giants fans can actually follow the whole team throughout every single week to the very end of the last snap for the New York Giants football team. And that's about it, folks. While they are going to be 9-7 and miss the playoffs, we will see a huge improvement, and I look forward to the 2019 New York Giants regular season. Let's go, Big Blue. It's your boy HP signing off. Thanks for tuning in. Peace out.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.